Adrian was a man who shaped his life with precision. He had spent the better part of a decade building his reputation as a disciplined, clear-thinking CEO. Employees at his company recognized him as driven and efficient, and his name carried enough weight in the corporate world that whenever he walked into a conference room, everyone sat upright. Yet behind that exterior of controlled calm, he often felt a stranglehold on his ability to connect with anyone, even those closest to him. At 32 years old, Adrian found himself stifled by the very impulses that had once served him well in business. He controlled every second of his day, set demanding standards for his team, and masked his own frustration behind an unreadable expression. It was this tight-fisted management of emotions that threatened to rupture what small measure of peace he had at home. His partner, Ava, had gently suggested professional help. She was kind yet straightforward, telling him over dinner one night, "I know you want to be in control, but I see how it hurts you. It's not just about scheduling. It's about how you talk to me, how you shut down when things get rough." She paused, as if weighing how to phrase her next sentence. "You're not alone, Adrian, but I need you to find someone you can talk to. I'm worried about you." He was initially resistant. "I'm fine. My company's thriving, and I handle stress well enough," he had said, though it was clear from the tension in his voice that he had some doubts. Still, in the days that followed, he found himself revisiting Ava's words and noticing just how distant he felt from even the simplest pleasures: an afternoon walk, a casual conversation. When he realized he was incapable of relaxing without planning every second of his day, he relented and scheduled an appointment with a therapist whose reputation for innovative approaches preceded her. That was how Adrian arrived at the cozy, softly lit office of Dr. Lena Fischer. She was a well-regarded psychologist in her early 40s, thoughtful in her gestures, with dark blonde hair secured in a neat bun. The walls of her office were lined with books ranging from classic psychoanalysis to drama therapy. On that first day, Adrian felt uneasy, bracing himself for what he assumed would be conventional talk therapy. But he quickly learned that Dr. Fischer did not limit herself to traditional conversation. They had chatted about routine matters at the start, as if Dr. Fischer wanted to establish a common language. She asked about his childhood, schooling, friendships, and the expected queries about how he was sleeping, if he ate well, how his emotional life felt day to day. He found himself intrigued by her calm and respectful demeanor. He had come prepared with defenses, certain she would pry in ways that made him uncomfortable. But instead, she seemed genuinely interested in understanding the nuances of his emotional control. After 15 minutes, Dr. Fischer gently pushed a box of tissues in his direction. He noticed it, but was not sure what to make of it. She leaned forward a little. "Adrian, what do you think prevents you from sharing your stress at work or at home?" He shrugged. "Sharing isn't productive," he replied. "All it does is slow me down, or so I've always believed. If people see me struggling, that undermines my position as a leader." She nodded. "Is that your own belief, or did you pick that up from people around you at some point?" "It's a pattern I've noticed. Growing up, my father was strict. He never wasted a moment talking about personal matters. He believed in logic and solutions." Adrian let out a cautious breath, impressed by how quickly Dr. Fischer had led him to reflect on his upbringing. "We didn't spend time discussing emotions. It was always about discipline and achievement." "What about your mother?" He swallowed. "She tried to get me to open up from time to time, but my father's voice was always stronger." Dr. Fischer nodded again, her gaze steady. "You're here now. Something in you wants to do this, even if it contradicts your usual patterns. I'd like to explore experiential approaches if you're open to them. Talking helps, but there are techniques that can go deeper." He raised his eyebrows. I'm not sure what you mean by techniques. She stood up, went to a bookshelf, and returned with a small pamphlet in her hand. One method I use is called psychodrama, or we might call it role-playing for simplicity. You take a role in a scenario that mirrors real events or emotional states. When you step into it physically, it can unlock feelings or insights you might not reach by thought alone. Adrian, who prided himself on logical thinking, looked uncertain. Role-playing? Like acting? In a sense, yes, but the purpose isn't performance for an audience. It's a guided exercise to help you express hidden dimensions of your psyche. He shifted in his chair. That sounds unorthodox. She offered a slight smile. It can be, but I've seen many clients experience breakthroughs because it gets them out of their heads. It's safe, controlled, and you decide how far you want to go. He had hesitated. On the surface, it seemed almost childish to consider acting out aspects of his life. Yet something in him felt curiously drawn to an approach that might shake up his long-standing patterns. He ended the first session non-committal, promising only to think about it. In the second session, Dr. Fischer began with a simpler step. She had Adrian enact a conversation with his inner child. He was told to sit in one chair as his adult self, then move to another chair and speak from the perspective of the younger Adrian. It felt awkward. He didn't know how to lower his voice or posture to reflect a child, especially with Dr. Fischer quietly guiding him to imagine a scenario of conflict from when he was 10. Yet a quiet sting emerged in the recollection. As the role play continued, Dr. Fischer asked him to alternate between the adult and younger version of himself. At first, he was self-conscious, stumbling through stilted lines. But the exercise drew out surprising revelations. The frustration that he had felt for years, the wish that someone would see him even if he didn't live up to the highest standards. By the end of that session, Adrian felt a curious sense of relief, though he hated admitting it had come from something that had seemed so theatrical. He thanked Dr. Fischer somewhat stiffly and left the office in a contemplative mood. In the following weeks, the sessions continued. Each time, Dr. Fischer would guide him toward a different role. The critic session was particularly intense. Adrian was asked to stand in the middle of the room, fists clenched, as though he was scolding himself with harsh words. He was supposed to let those thoughts spill out, those judgments about never doing enough, about always having more to achieve. It was uncomfortable, but he noticed how easily those words poured from his mouth. He realized how deeply ingrained that internal voice was. A turning point came when Dr. Fischer mentioned the archetypal roles in everyone's psyche. She referenced concepts by certain analysts who believed individuals carry a range of inner figures: the warrior, the nurturer, the trickster. Then she brought up the concept of the anima, described as a person's innermost feminine expression, a representation of intuition, emotional fluidity, and empathy. Adrian found himself stiffening at the suggestion. This idea might help you, especially since you handle everything so logically, Dr. Fischer explained calmly. You might discover more about your emotional range if you allow yourself to embody this feminine aspect. It's not about your identity or orientation. Rather, it's about connecting to qualities that have been set aside. He frowned. I'm not sure how I feel about. You want me to pretend I'm a woman? She kept her tone neutral, careful. Not exactly pretend you are a woman, but step into a role that symbolizes traits typically associated with nurturing, compassion, receptivity. It's a means to unlock your ability to empathize and feel. He looked away. A tightness coiled in his gut. Adrian had spent a lifetime ensuring that nobody would ever question his composure or his capability. The thought of stepping into a role so seemingly alien to him was jarring. And how would we do this exactly? She offered a small demonstration, reaching for a long scarf draped over a chair in the corner of the room. Handing it to him, she said gently, "Sometimes a simple prop helps. You can drape it over your shoulders or hold it in your lap, just to mark that you're in a different space, a different role. We don't have to do a grand transformation. Even sitting differently can help you shift your perspective." Reluctantly, Adrian allowed the scarf to rest on his shoulders. Dr. Fischer asked him to close his eyes and imagine a scenario in which he needed to comfort a friend who was hurting. For a moment, he felt almost ridiculous, the scarf feeling out of place on his tailored shirt. Yet as he listened to Dr. Fischer's gentle prompts, he noticed a peculiar warmth spreading through him. He felt a twinge of empathy, a small stirring of concern for someone else's well-being. This was so distant from his usual approach, which was to solve problems methodically and then move on. But here, there was no problem to solve. The purpose was purely to feel. "Take a breath," Dr. Fischer said softly. "In this role, you're allowing yourself to be open to pain, to worry, to fear. Can you speak as if you're offering comfort to that friend?" He tried, cautiously. "I'm sorry you're going through this. I'm here to listen if you want," he said, words that might seem simple, yet in Adrian's mouth, they carried new weight. He found his throat constricting as he spoke, a sign of an emotional wave he'd never fully allowed himself to ride. Once the session ended, he quietly handed the scarf back. He felt unsteady, like someone had pressed a tender bruise. "I'm not sure how I feel," he admitted, though he realized he was less tense in that moment than usual. Dr. Fischer nodded. "You don't have to decide right away, but keep in mind that these roles can help open windows to emotions we rarely embrace." Adrian left, mind swirling with a mixture of discomfort and curiosity. The next session was scheduled for the following week, but he found himself replaying those moments in his head sooner than that. The memory of how he had felt wearing that scarf lingered in odd ways. He wouldn't say it was pleasurable exactly. It was more like stepping onto foreign soil, seeing a new landscape, and realizing something about it held promise. At home, Ava noticed he was quieter than usual, yet she also observed he seemed slightly more patient with her questions. One night, as they sat on the couch, she leaned into him, relieved to sense some softness. "Therapy seems to be helping," she said. He hesitated, unsure how much to share. "It's different. I'm not just talking about my childhood." Then he trailed off, partially embarrassed to mention the role-playing, especially the anima role. Instead of dismissing him, Ava took his hand and just sat with him in companionable silence. Days passed, and Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to explore in the realm Dr. Fischer had introduced. He started reading articles about psychodrama, though the idea of stepping further into that feminine role both intrigued and unsettled him. Part of him wondered, would it help if, on his own, he experimented with more elaborate ways to embody those traits? Not just draping a scarf, but fully immersing himself in that emotional state? One evening, he decided to run a small experiment in his study at home. He locked the door, feeling a spike of tension. He had gone shopping earlier that week in a different neighborhood where nobody would recognize him. He had purchased a few items of clothing typically worn by women, a loose-fitting cardigan, a long skirt, and a more delicate blouse. He chose conservative garments that didn't feel flashy or extreme, yet were distinctly outside his everyday attire. As he stood there, clothes laid out on the chair, Adrian felt his heart pound. It felt foolish. It felt liberating. It felt entirely bizarre. But there was a pull, an urge to see if physically changing into these items might provoke a stronger link to that emotionally receptive place he had briefly touched upon in Dr. Fischer's office. He dressed slowly, carefully, not wanting to tear the fabric or make noise. At first, the sensation of a skirt swirling around his legs was so different from anything he was used to that he almost laughed. But he pressed on. He took a seat on his desk chair and closed his eyes, recalling the cues Dr. Fischer had given him. He tried to imagine an invisible scenario in which he offered comfort or empathy. He thought of conversations he had with Ava where she needed emotional support. Rather than stifle it, he let the feelings come. Something inside him eased. Perhaps it was the novelty of it all, but he found a real release in stepping beyond the rigid demands of his usual self. He felt less weighed down by his constant desire to shape the world. He felt more reflective. After nearly half an hour of sitting there, inhaling deeply and letting these gentle thoughts unfold, he found his mind calmer. He changed back into his own clothes and carefully stored the purchased garments in a private box. In the subsequent therapy session, Dr. Fischer continued to steer him toward deeper emotional expression. She asked how he'd been feeling since last time. He almost considered revealing his experiment, but he was still uncertain how she would react. Was he pushing her method too far? Was it even relevant? So he gave a guarded answer. Some positive remarks about noticing changes in his levels of tension, and a vague mention that he was indeed opening up more than before. Privately, however, he maintained this occasional practice. Once or twice a week, he would slip into his study late at night, lock the door, and change into the clothes he had purchased. He would sit quietly, sometimes journaling or doing short meditations. The act wasn't about sexual desire, and that fact was clear to him. It was about stepping away from his usual persona to tap into a different dimension, one that could hold vulnerability and empathy without apology. He started a journal strictly for these moments, penning thoughts he could barely articulate elsewhere. He asked himself questions. Why was it easier to feel concern for others when wearing these items? Why did stepping out of his usual attire free him from the need to appear invulnerable? As the weeks turned into more than a month, he realized this was becoming an important part of his overall growth. The impact extended beyond the locked study door. He was more patient in staff meetings, listening to employees' concerns rather than immediately pushing for solutions. He was more attuned to Ava's moods at home, noticing when she looked tired or troubled, and he tried to engage her with gentle questions. Yet his private practice was creating a secret wedge. He was torn on whether he should let Dr. Fischer know the full scope of his efforts. On one hand, he suspected the secrecy might sabotage the therapeutic process at some point. On the other hand, he worried she might not understand, or that she might consider him unhinged for going beyond the scarf. And then there was Ava. He valued her more than any business deal, and the thought of explaining his solitary late-night routine was nerve-wracking. What would she think? In one therapy session, Dr. Fischer seemed to sense he was holding back. She asked him if there was anything he felt uneasy about sharing. He cleared his throat, feeling a twinge of guilt. "I've been trying to explore these roles on my own," he admitted, as vague as possible. He watched her face carefully for judgment, but she remained steady. "Good," she said. "What have you noticed?" He explained that stepping into the feminine role, even briefly, gave him a surprising openness. "It's like I can experience a softer side," he said, choosing his words cautiously. She nodded. "That's valuable, and it can deepen if you're ready to push further. But remember, I'm here to help you navigate it. You don't have to do it alone if you're not comfortable." Adrian nodded, struggling with what to say next. He settled for a diplomatic reply. "Thank you. I appreciate that." As the weeks turned into months, the tension about whether to share more details with Dr. Fischer or Ava grew. One evening, after he had spent nearly an hour in his study wearing the clothes and writing in his journal, he emerged feeling a surge of guilt. He was hiding something fundamental about his emotional evolution. Ava was in the living room with a book, Glancing up when she saw him, she smiled, but there was a questioning look in her eyes, as if she sensed the distance he was creating through silence. They went to bed quietly that night. Adrian tossed and turned, replaying all the therapy sessions and the late-night experiments in his mind. As much as he dreaded it, he realized he couldn't keep dancing around the truth with Dr. Fischer forever. That secrecy felt counterproductive, and while he wasn't sure how to talk to Ava yet, at least he could start with Dr. Fischer, who was trained to handle the vulnerable aspects of her clients. He arrived at her office the next day, unsettled but determined. After they settled into their usual seats, she asked him to describe his emotional state. He exhaled slowly. "There's something I need to share with you. Remember the session where we did the scarf exercise? I told you I was experimenting on my own." She offered a reassuring nod. "Yes, you mentioned you had tried some role play in private. Have you gone further?" He swallowed. "I purchased some clothing, not just scarves, but items designed for women. I've been wearing them in my study at home. It's not..." He paused, searching for how best to describe it. "It's not for physical excitement. It's to better access that side of myself I discovered with you." Her expression was thoughtful, not alarmed. "I see. Go on." "It helps me get out of my usual mindset. I've been journaling while in that role, and in a strange way, it's given me a sense of freedom I never had before. But it's also terrifying because I don't know if it's normal." She tilted her head slightly. "We're all complicated. If this technique helps you feel your emotions more fully, and it's not harming anyone, it might be a powerful tool. How do you feel about continuing it?" He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Relieved, I guess. Part of me felt embarrassed, like maybe this was something I should hide. But it's actually helping me." Dr. Fischer studied him a moment. "Therapy is about exploration. This is part of your path. The important question is whether it's giving you insights into your relationships, your stress, your sense of empathy. Does it?" He nodded. "Absolutely. I'm kinder at work. People have noticed a change in how I listen. And with Ava, I'm trying to be more present, though I haven't told her about this." She gave him an understanding look. "That choice is yours. If you think it would help her understand you, sharing might be the next step, but it's a personal decision. How does the idea of telling her make you feel?" Adrian's gaze dropped. "Scared. I don't want her to think differently of me. I don't want her to worry that I'm losing my sense of who I am, but I also don't like keeping secrets." "She cares about you," Dr. Fischer reminded him. "Consider that as you weigh the decision." He went home that day with a lighter heart. It felt like a breakthrough to have told Dr. Fischer. There was no condemnation, no suggestion that he was going too far. Instead, she had validated the notion that these private sessions in his study were part of his growth. He was comforted that he had someone who knew the whole story. Yet that night, as Adrian lay awake staring at the ceiling, he recognized that simply confiding in Dr. Fischer might not resolve his conflict about Ava. The point of the therapy was to improve his connections, not to hide behind new forms of secrecy. One evening, as he and Ava cleared the dinner plates and placed them in the dishwasher, he broached the subject tentatively. "Ava," he said, bracing himself, "there's something I've been doing in my therapy that's kind of unusual. It's helped me, but I haven't felt comfortable sharing until now." She dried her hands on a dish towel and turned to face him, wearing that gentle look that always reminded him why he was drawn to her in the first place. "I'm listening." He cleared his throat. "My therapist and I have been using psychodrama, role-play techniques. Recently, I've been exploring this feminine archetype to access empathy. It's a sort of internal role to help me be more emotionally open. She nodded slowly, head slightly tilted in curiosity. Okay, that's interesting. He went on, summoning courage. I've been taking it further at home, in private. Not just thinking about it, but wearing clothes designed for women sometimes when I'm alone, so I can better feel that emotional space. It's not a romantic or physical thing. It's more about letting myself be vulnerable in a new way. Ava listened intently, placing a hand lightly on his arm. Thank you for telling me. I won't lie, I'm a bit surprised. She paused, considering her words. But if it's helping you connect to something that makes you kinder or more open, it's not necessarily harmful. Are you doing okay with it? He exhaled in relief. Mostly. I was scared you'd see me differently. I know it's unconventional. She gave him a small smile. I see you as the man I care about, who's doing whatever it takes to grow. I don't want you to feel ashamed. I'm just glad you trust me enough to tell me. He felt a wave of gratitude so strong it nearly choked him up. Thank you. It means a lot that you can be so understanding. They ended the night in a warm embrace, with Ava running her fingers through his hair as he breathed in her familiar scent. Though he felt an odd swirl of emotions, he was relieved that she had not pushed him away or mocked his method. He sensed in her an openness to learn and see how this might benefit their shared life. Days passed, and with the secret no longer hidden from Dr. Fischer or Ava, Adrian felt an unusual lightness in his chest. His daily life went on much as before. He was still a CEO juggling meetings, deadlines, and investor phone calls. But behind the crisp suits he wore to the office, he carried a sense that he was no longer trapped by his old emotional straitjacket. He could feel a deeper empathy for the people around him. Instead of scolding his employees for failing to meet a deadline, he found himself asking them questions about what challenges they had faced and how he could support them in meeting the next milestone. This new attitude surprised him more than it did them. He continued to meet with Dr. Fischer once a week, fine-tuning the role-playing exercises. She guided him through more complex scenarios, sometimes involving dialogues with imaginary figures symbolizing old traumas or regrets. With the anima role, as she still referred to it, Adrian began to cultivate a calmer, more nurturing presence that seeped into his ordinary interactions. It was as if he had discovered a hidden door in himself that led to a tranquil garden, and each time he opened it, the anxiety he once felt about controlling everything lessened a bit. One session, Dr. Fischer encouraged him to bring any item or outfit that helped him access that state. "We have a private space here, no judgment," she assured him. Adrian considered it for a while and decided that since he had already confided in her, it might be beneficial to see how an actual therapy session would go if he did use more than a scarf. He carefully packed a few items in a discreet bag, the skirt and cardigan he had purchased, along with a simple blouse. He arrived early and told the receptionist he needed privacy to prepare. Dr. Fischer, ever professional, ensured that the therapy room was locked and that he could change behind a folding screen. He felt vulnerable as he stepped out, tugging the cardigan around himself. Dr. Fischer remained composed, giving him the same calm look she always did. "Let's begin," she said, her voice gentle. "I want you to imagine you're comforting the part of you that worries about whether he's enough, your inner critic. Talk to him as if he's sitting in front of you." At first, Adrian found it surreal. He was standing in Dr. Fischer's office, wearing clothes that felt foreign, talking to an invisible part of himself. Yet within minutes, the tension in his shoulders eased. The costume, the environment, and Dr. Fischer's steady guidance merged into a scene that opened him to emotions he had never before dared to express. He spoke softly, consoling the critical figure that had lived in his mind for so long, letting him know it was acceptable to release fear. Dr. Fischer's prompts helped him practice empathy in a way that felt startlingly raw. When the session ended, he changed back into his suit and took a seat, the clothes he had worn neatly folded. He was drained, but also oddly exhilarated. "That was powerful," Dr. Fischer commented. "You allowed yourself to address a deep part of your anxiety. How do you feel?" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "Lighter, like there's more space inside me, if that makes sense." She smiled. "That's a positive sign. The more you experience these layers of yourself, the more you'll find new ways to relate to the world." On his drive home, he thought about her words. She had given him permission to incorporate this method in a structured, therapeutic manner. His private experiments, while helpful, were sometimes clouded by shame or confusion. Now, under Dr. Fischer's professional supervision, he felt a kind of validation. He wasn't indulging a strange habit. He was using a carefully guided tool to address his emotional rigidity. Ava was curious about how the session had gone. They sat at the kitchen table, sharing a simple dinner of grilled chicken and vegetables. Adrian recounted in careful detail how he had brought the clothes to the therapy room, how Dr. Fischer had guided him through a scenario of comforting the harsh inner voice. Ava listened, occasionally nodding, eyes full of interest. At the end, she reached across the table and gently squeezed his hand. "Sounds like it was intense," she said. "I'm proud of you for letting yourself do this. I know it can't be easy." His eyes stung with gratitude. "It wasn't easy, but it felt important." She leaned in. "You're changing in good ways, Adrian. I see it every day. I'm here for you." Her warmth touched him deeply. Although he hadn't once imagined he'd be discussing cross-dressing as a therapeutic tool with the woman he loved, it felt like a testament to their bond that she was standing beside him. As time passed, they worked out a balance at home. Adrian chose certain nights to spend half an hour in his study, and he didn't hide it from Ava anymore. If she wanted to ask questions, she would. If not, she would simply give him space. Sometimes he'd come out of those sessions with his eyes red, having cried about something he unearthed in that introspective frame of mind. Other times he emerged calm and ready to share details of what he had written in his journal. He even told a close friend, someone he trusted deeply outside of the corporate sphere, at a dinner where they spoke about personal developments. Although the friend was initially taken aback, he listened and respected Adrian's openness. "I never knew you were dealing with so much internally," the friend admitted, "but I'm glad you found a way forward." Months later, Adrian noticed that each therapy session with Dr. Fischer felt less like an excruciating climb and more like a purposeful exploration. She still occasionally brought out props, including scarves or empty chairs for dialogues. Yet the role play with the feminine archetype had become a central piece for him. Through it, he learned to acknowledge his need for support and to offer support more freely to others. He realized that he didn't have to remain a solitary fortress of logic. In staff meetings, he saw the difference. Employees were more comfortable speaking up because he no longer dismissed them with a curt nod. He asked them to share difficulties, and he genuinely listened. Productivity improved, morale rose, and ironically, the company thrived even more. In his personal life, he and Ava became closer, no longer separated by his rigid shell. Although they still had disagreements, his approach shifted from shutting her out to hearing her perspective. Even small gestures, like spontaneously giving her a hug in the morning or offering to help with tasks around the house, became opportunities to show that new emotional quality. Now and then, he felt uncertain whether this was just a phase or if it would weave permanently into his life. he still had that voice inside that occasionally whispered doubts, telling him that wearing those outfits was strange, that it clashed with the image of a powerful CEO. But with every positive change he saw, that voice grew quieter. One afternoon, Dr. Fischer raised the prospect of eventually reducing their sessions. "You've made substantial progress," she told him. "We can continue for as long as it feels necessary, but remember, the goal of therapy is to reach a place where you trust your own growth." Adrian listened, marveling at how different those words sounded compared to when he first set foot in her office. Back then, the concept of stepping into any role beyond busy CEO was unimaginable. Now, he was not only stepping into other roles, but embracing the unexpected nuance they brought to his life. He couldn't say for sure that he'd never need more sessions, but he appreciated the sense of possibility Dr. Fischer's approach had opened. That night, after dinner, he and Ava lounged on the couch. She rested her head on his shoulder, flipping through channels before settling on a calming documentary. He could tell she was thinking something over, because she hadn't been paying attention to the screen. At last, she turned and looked at him. "How would you feel if I saw you in those clothes one day?" she asked gently. He felt a rush of warmth and nervous energy. "I'm not sure," he replied. "It would be a step. It might make me feel exposed." She nodded, understanding. "I don't want to push you, but I'm here if you ever want me to be part of that side of your life. Not because I need it, but because I see what it means to you. It's so rare to see you so at peace." He paused, reflecting on the significance of her request. If he let her see him in that state, it would mark a deeper level of trust between them. He wasn't fully sure he was ready, yet her acceptance soothed him. "Let me think about it," he said. Their intimacy that night was gentle, comforting. He realized that despite his initial fears, Ava's respect for him had not diminished. In fact, she seemed more devoted than ever, and her invitation lingered in his mind, suggesting the possibility of bringing this new dimension of himself fully into their shared space. A few weeks later, he mustered the courage. He prepared the clothes in the study, arranging them carefully. Ava was in the living room, leafing through a magazine. He poked his head out of the study door and invited her inside. She stepped in, found a chair, and waited with calm anticipation. Adrian changed behind the folding screen, his heart pounding. When he emerged, skirt and blouse in place, a cardigan draped over his shoulders, he felt a trembling that was more intense than any business negotiation he'd ever faced. Ava stood up slowly. She approached him with tender eyes, taking in the image of him in an entirely different style of clothing. She didn't laugh or recoil. Instead, she reached out and placed a hand on his arm, the same way she would if he were dressed in his usual business attire. "Hi," she said softly. He cleared his throat, voice trembling slightly. "Hi." They stood there for a moment, the air charged with vulnerability and respect. Ava's voice took on a near whisper. "You look comfortable. Is that how you feel?" He nodded slowly. "In a way, yes. I feel oddly safe, but also exposed." He laughed nervously. "It's hard to describe." She nodded, gesturing for him to sit. She sat across from him, folding her hands in her lap. "I'm glad you wanted to share this with me," she said. "It's not something you should have to hide." They spoke for nearly an hour, with Adrian explaining more in depth what he experienced when wearing the garments. He told her about the illusions he imagined, almost like stepping into a different emotional world where it was easier to let go of his shield. She asked questions, but mainly she just listened. At some point, she leaned forward and wrapped her arms around him, hugging him gently. In that soft and quiet moment, Adrian felt more seen than he ever had. All those years building walls, building a company, building a public image, it seemed to converge in this moment of simple acceptance from someone he treasured. He closed his eyes, feeling tears prick at the corners. For once, he allowed them to flow in front of someone else without shame. In the days that followed, that moment remained etched in his memory. The gentle acceptance and her willingness to explore his new expressions stayed with him. The next time he visited Dr. Fischer, he shared the entire story, from how he had invited Ava into the study to how it felt to see her reaction. "That's a big step," Dr. Fischer said, her gentle smile warm. "It sounds like she loves you deeply, and that you found a new level of closeness." Adrian nodded, a trace of emotion still lingering in his voice. "I never thought I could let someone in that much." Their therapy sessions continued a little while longer, focusing on refining Adrian's ability to navigate his full range of emotions. As time went on, he recognized that this cross-dressing aspect wasn't merely about a garment or a performance. It was about granting himself permission to connect with emotional currents he had kept dammed up for years. Gradually, Dr. Fischer suggested spacing the sessions out more, moving from weekly to bi-weekly, and finally to monthly check-ins. Adrian was struck by the confidence she placed in him to continue on his own. When he reflected on how reluctant and guarded he was on the first day he stepped into her office, he marveled at the transformation. No longer did he struggle with suffocating control issues. Yes, he still liked to keep things organized. His phone calendar was as color-coded as ever. But he also left room for the unexpected. He could deal with a canceled meeting or a personal conflict without spiraling into anxious micromanagement. There was a balance he had found through the therapy, and ironically, it made him a better leader and partner. He never turned his back on the method that had aided his progress. When he felt stress piling up, he took out his private box, changed clothes, and spent quiet minutes journaling or meditating. Sometimes he included Ava, other times he preferred solitude. It became a recognized component of his personal routine, a reminder of the complexity of his emotional makeup. Dr. Fischer once told him that these archetypal roles were not destinations. They were doorways, each leading to different rooms in the house of one's mind. The cross-dressing had become one such doorway, leading him to deeper compassion and emotional fluency. Months passed, the corporate world continued, and Adrian's firm achieved remarkable expansions. In private, he laughed at how people often credited his sharp intellect and strategic thinking for the company's success, never realizing that part of it came from the empathy and clarity he had developed through such an unconventional path. Perhaps he would reveal bits of this journey to close friends, or maybe he would keep it to himself. Either way, the fear and shame had ebbed away, replaced by an understanding that he had found a path that enriched his life. By the time Dr. Fischer suggested that he might not need regular therapy anymore, Adrian felt it was the right moment. She shook his hand at their final scheduled session, both of them standing in that softly lit room that had been the site of so many breakthroughs. "You know where to find me if you ever want to schedule again," Dr. Fischer said, the same calm twinkle in her eyes. He nodded. "I really appreciate everything. I'm not sure words can do justice to how much this has changed me." She offered him a kind smile. "Keep staying open, Adrian. You've proven to yourself that you're capable of far more than you ever believed." He left her office feeling a bittersweet sense of completion. He texted Ava on his way out, a simple note. "Done with my final session. I'll be home soon. Love you." He slid into the driver's seat, reflecting on where he had been just a year ago. That rigid, lonely version of himself felt like a ghost from another lifetime, though he could still recall the knot of tension he used to carry in his chest. He was no longer defined by the iron control that once ruled him. Instead, He moved forward carrying a subtle grace born of those months in therapy, the cross-dressing practice, the journaling, and the honest conversations with the people he cared about. Nothing about the road ahead was guaranteed. Life would undoubtedly bring fresh obstacles, new demands at work, challenges in his relationship, unforeseen personal trials. But he no longer approached those concerns with the same clenched fists. In place of fear stood a willingness to feel, to empathize, and to embrace the quieter strength he had discovered through a method he never dreamed he would try. That night, as he stepped into the house, Ava greeted him with a knowing look. The final session had clearly ended, yet their shared journey would continue. He closed the door behind him, set his keys on the entry table, and wrapped his arms around her in a quiet, lingering hug. Neither felt the need to say much. The warmth of that silent embrace said enough. They were building a more expansive future together, one where he was free to express his entire range without shame. He thought, with both relief and a touch of awe, that sometimes real growth could be found in the most unexpected places. And with that realization, he let himself accept, in the simplest and most human way, the promise of a life unburdened by the constant need for strict control. He would face tomorrow with the knowledge that every facet of himself, no matter how unconventional, contributed to a better, more honest existence. He hadn't lost himself in the process. If anything, he had discovered the profound strength hidden within the willingness to be seen as he truly was.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.